Khamzat Chimaev didn't just talk about smashing Dricus Du Plessis. He promised 25 minutes of domination. And then, at UFC 319, he went out there and did exactly that. In this video, we're breaking it all down. How Chimaev turned his words into a blueprint for victory. How he dismantled Du Plessis round by round. And why this fight wasn't just about winning the middleweight belt, but about proving that sometimes, when you talk the talk, you really can walk the walk. Stick around, because we're going to take you inside the chaos of Fight Week, the brutal 25 minutes inside the cage, and the aftermath of Chimaev's championship statement. If you love seeing moments where words become reality, this is one fight breakdown you don't want to miss. So let's start with the big question. Was UFC 319 really 25 minutes of one-sided domination from Khamzat Chimaev? Or was that just Fight Week hype? The truth is, it absolutely was domination. But not in the quick, reckless way you might picture when someone like Chimaev promises to smash an opponent. This was calculated, patient, and suffocating. For 25 straight minutes, Dricus Du Plessis never had a chance to breathe, never had a chance to impose his game plan, and never truly looked like the champion he came in as. From the opening seconds, Chimaev set the tone. He didn't storm forward recklessly. He pressured Du Plessis with controlled aggression, forcing him onto the back foot. Du Plessis, who usually thrives when he's dictating the pace, was reacting instead of initiating. That shift mattered, because once you're fighting off Chimaev's rhythm, you're in deep trouble. By the end of round one, it was clear what kind of fight this would be. Chimaev's wrestling was relentless. He didn't just take Du Plessis down, he chained attempts together, mixed in clinch strikes, and forced him to constantly defend. Even when Dricus managed to get back to his feet, the price was heavy. He ate punches, elbows, and knees in transition. The exhaustion was already building. Round two told the same story, only worse. Chimaev kept the pace high and the pressure constant. Du Plessis had moments, brief flashes where he threw wild combinations or tried to scramble, but nothing landed clean, and every failed attempt drained more energy. Meanwhile, Chimaev looked calm, almost comfortable, talking to his corner mid-fight and smiling as he broke his opponent down. What made this fight so striking wasn't just Chimaev's physical dominance, it was the psychological control. Remember, Du Plessis had promised he'd be the one to wrestle, that he'd drag Chimaev into deep waters. Instead, he was the one drowning. By round three, his body language said it all. Hands low, breathing heavy, looking for answers that weren't there. Chimaev, on the other hand, looked fresh, as if he could keep this up for 10 rounds. Round 4 and 5 were almost cruel. Chimaev didn't just hold position, he made statements. Ground and pound, submission attempts, pressure against the cage. He showed every part of his MMA game, and every second reinforced his pre-fight words. This was 25 minutes of domination. Du Plessis never came close to a finish. He never swung momentum. The scorecards, a shutout. Judges gave every round to Chimaev, with some even scoring 10-8s. So was it hype? This was one of the rare times in UFC history where a fighter promised pure domination and then delivered exactly that. Chimaev didn't just win the middleweight belt. He fulfilled his trash talk word for word, proving that when he says he's going to smash someone, he means it. And maybe that's what makes this fight so memorable. Not the knockout, not a flashy highlight, but the fact that Chimaev promised 25 minutes of hell, and Du Plessis lived every second of it. How did Chimaev actually back up every word of his trash talk when so many fighters end up eating their own promises? The key is this: Khamzat doesn't just talk for hype, He talks in a way that lines up perfectly with his fighting style. When he said he was going to smash Du Plessis for 25 minutes, that wasn't just empty bravado. It was a blueprint. He meant it literally, and then he executed on it. Think about it. Plenty of fighters sell fights with wild claims, quick knockouts, guaranteed submissions, walk-off KOs. But the reality of MMA is unpredictable. You make one mistake, and all that talk backfires. With Chimaev, though, his approach is built for consistency. Pressure, wrestling, suffocation. Those aren't gambles, they're reliable weapons. They travel well against any opponent, and they don't depend on landing a single perfect shot. That's why his trash talk landed so hard. When he said Du Plessis was going to break, it wasn't just an insult. It was rooted in how he fights. He drags opponents into a style of fight that forces them to either fold under the pace or survive while taking damage. Against Du Plessis, we saw both. Early on, Dricus was resisting, trying to scramble and fire back. But by the championship rounds, he was just surviving. Exactly the outcome Chimaev predicted. Another big factor? Chimaev never let the moment overwhelm him. We've seen plenty of fighters promise domination only to get reckless chasing it. They burn out, they get clipped, they look human. Chimaev did the opposite. He stayed disciplined, sticking to his game plan with almost machine-like focus. That calm confidence, that's what made every word of his trash talk believable in hindsight. And then there's the mental warfare. In Fight Week, Chimaev told anyone who would listen that Du Plessis wasn't ready for his pace. Once the fight started, he proved it wasn't just talk, it was truth. Every round was psychological punishment as much as physical. Du Plessis had to live with the fact that his opponent called the outcome days earlier. That's a different level of control. So how did he back it up? By aligning his words with the reality of his style, by making predictions that weren't wild guesses, but inevitable outcomes of the way he fights, and by staying calm enough under the spotlight to turn pressure into fuel, not failure. At UFC 319, Chimaev didn't just back up his trash talk, he made it look like prophecy. What made this trash talk different? Why did it fuel Chimaev instead of backfiring like it usually does for other fighters? The answer lies in intent. For most fighters, trash talk is a weapon aimed outward. It's about rattling the opponent, selling pay-per-views, or getting under someone's skin. But for Chimaev, the trash talk seemed to be aimed inward. It wasn't just hype for the cameras, it was a promise he made to himself. When he said, 25 minutes of smashing, he locked himself into that standard. There was no way he was going to allow anything less. That's what made it so powerful. The trash talk became accountability. Every word he spoke turned into pressure, but instead of crumbling under it, he thrived. He used it as fuel. You could see it in the fight. Every takedown, every strike, every exchange was Chimaev making good on his word, proving to everyone and maybe most importantly to himself that his talk wasn't empty. They promise a knockout in round one, and when it doesn't come, their confidence starts to slip. Chimaev never boxed himself into that trap. He didn't promise a flashy finish. He promised domination, and domination can take many forms: pressure, control, suffocating pace. That gave him room to fulfill his words in a way that looked inevitable once the fight began. Another reason his trash talk hit differently: authenticity. Chimaev talks the way he fights, raw, straightforward, no filter. Fans can sense when someone is faking bravado versus when it's real. With him, it felt real, and when he delivered on it, the words gained even more weight. And finally, the timing. Trash talk only works if you can deliver in the biggest moments. UFC 319 wasn't just another fight. It was for the middleweight title, the defining stage of his career so far. For Chimaev to double down on his words on that kind of stage and then go out and dominate exactly as promised, that's what turned trash talk into legend. So when you put it all together, the reason Chimaev's trash talk worked is simple. It wasn't a gimmick. It was a reflection of who he is. It set the standard he had to live up to, and then he went out there and lived it for 25 brutal minutes. That's rare. That's why fans remember it. And that's why UFC 319 will forever stand as the fight where Khamzat Chimaev proved that sometimes words really can become reality. And that's what makes UFC 319 unforgettable. For years, fans have seen trash talk fall flat. Fighters promise domination, promise knockouts, promise that their opponent won't last a round, only to step into the octagon and watch reality expose their words. But this night was different. This night, Khamzat Chimaev made every single prediction come true. He said he'd smash Dricus Du Plessis. He said it would be 25 minutes of pure domination. He said he'd leave as the UFC Middleweight Champion. And when the final horn sounded in Chicago, every word had become fact. The crowd knew they weren't just watching another title fight. They were witnessing the birth of a moment that will be replayed for years. A fighter who didn't just talk to sell a fight. He talked to set a standard and then lived up to it in front of the world. Du Plessis was a warrior, no doubt. He had heart, he had toughness, he had championship experience. But on that night, in that cage, he had no answers. Chimaev was simply too much. And that's why this fight matters, because it wasn't just about the belt. It wasn't even just about domination. It was about truth. For once, in a sport built on unpredictability, the script unfolded exactly as promised. Words became reality. So now the question becomes, what's next? Who dares to step up to a man who doesn't just talk trash, but turns his trash talk into prophecy? If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more moments where fight hype meets fight reality, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Chimaev's reign is just beginning, or will someone finally silence the Smash Brother? Let's hear it.